You guys hear me?
Yeah, mate, we can hear you.
All right, cool.
Can't see you though.
Yeah, I'm gonna turn on video in a second. Just grabbing some water. Hold on.
Can people hear me now? Here we go.
Yeah, we can hear you, Kendall. Had a bit of feedback from you then, though.
Yeah, that's because we're in the same room. Let me see. Let me move it.
I mean, I'm just testing too.
All right. Let's see. No feedback?
That's not too bad.
Okay. Let's see, what about now?
No, it's fine. Sounds okay.
Perfect. Yeah, I just had to put on a headset. Okay. Well, I guess we'll just start here with whoever's here, and whoever wants to join can join, and then we'll upload it later. So Paul is back, which is good. Today, just a bit of a summary on we're going to go over what's been going on the development since the last Zoom, which was 2 weeks ago. And then Kendall here is going to give a demonstration on the Binance module to kind of show how the module market works, how to implement a new module. And so you're going to see kind of some of that front end stuff, which is going to be good. So I guess on the basic front, Paul, do you want to read off some of the list, or I guess do you want me to just off the top of my head, I guess? You're usually
Yeah, because I don't have much of a list today.
Okay.
So, yeah, sorry.
So yeah, we have a few outstanding tasks. Some of the basic things that have functioned, I got the object registers are complete now. That allows kind of type safe object. In kind of computer programming terms, it's kind of like a struct where you can actually declare data members and their type, and it's type safe, and then you can operate on those specific types. So accounts or the object registers are fully complete now and integrated and running in the core. We've done a lot of unit testing, finishing all of that up, making sure that the rollbacks work as they should, expected wise. And then system registers is another really fun thing that I've been working on, which the first system register is the trust system register, which basically what that means is the system register can be only updated by the system. So when there's a consensus, let's say converging on a trust block that comes in, then that trust block is going to update the system register with its additional trust and any of its change of stake. So the proof of stake system is really close to completion. One of the reasons it's been a little delayed is because there's a different mechanism. So we're going to welcome feedback, obviously, in this. If anybody has any additional things during the Q&A aspect of it, of how the staking mechanism is going to work. But as it stands right now, as you have an object register, which is a trust object, which is inherited from a base account. A base account includes identifier and balance. A trust object includes 2 extra data members called stake and trust. So when you get your genesis, what's going to happen is the total available balance is going to be transferred into your stake. And that stake cannot be operated on by a debit or a credit, which means that that money is essentially locked up in your stake. Now, your reward is going to go to balance, which means that you'll be able to spend your balance, but you won't be able to spend your stake unless you do a special transaction that withdraws it from your stake account, which is going to cause you to lose some trust, so that people that lock up coins are essentially going to be keeping them off the market, and they're going to be staking those and be able to spend their specific reward. But it's going to essentially, I guess, be a stronger incentive to hold them in your trust key, which is your trust account, and accumulate your trust and build up your interest. So the second mechanism that comes from that, why I mentioned the system register, is the development of kind of a voting protocol, or an object register DAO, which is a Tritium++ feature that we're working towards, which essentially allows kind of community-wide governance of the actual ambassador and developer contracts, so that we have more DAO functionality. And I'll explain some of the mechanisms of how that's going to work a little bit later. But essentially, you're going to vote with your trust times your stake. So that's going to kind of make a more democratized developer and ambassador fund, which I think is going to be important for community involvement and growth in the future. So the reason we're putting that as a Tritium++ feature is there's going to be a lot of, we're going to have to build up the anticipation of that, and people are going to have to also understand, how to vote and things like that. So we want to kind of smoothly transition into that new infrastructure, so that we get a lot of active community voting. And usually people that run full trust nodes are generally going to be more active. So it's going to be just a simple new page in the wallet where you'll be able to see active ambassador contracts and either vote for or against them. And the votes will happen in real time, so that an ambassador contract will have an actual trust associated with it, that people vote with their trust key. And once it's over a threshold, then it becomes an active contract. And if enough votes are withdrawn from that contract, then that becomes deactivated until it reaches over that vote threshold. So that's a really exciting piece that I think is going to be really good for, I guess, more self-sufficiency and self-organization of the Nexus ecosystem, especially in the funding model. The secondary, we're looking at also putting more system register values for constants of the chain itself. So things like block size or trust key time span, or all of these hard-coded values are actually going to be system register values that we're going to develop, probably not in Tritium voting mechanisms to update them. We're just going to make them hard-coded system registers to set that foundation now. But essentially what that means is that the DAO will not only be capable of voting in and out contracts for developers or ambassadors or whatever, but the DAO is also going to be capable of changing the consensus rules without having to require a hard fork, so that we could resolve, let's say, a block size debate very, very quickly, just by a simple vote on the network stating that they want to change this value, and then enough people vote in favor of that value changing, the value will change. So it'll be kind of like a dynamic constants, as you could say, where system registers can only be updated through consensus. So that's that. Object registers, validation scripts are unit tested, ready to pretty much port in. That's kind of one of my next tasks, which is going to give us the full DEX functionality. Right now, transactions are reversible back to yourself. There's a claim operation, so that when you transfer a register, it actually has to be claimed by the other party. And that's where you start. In validation script logic, that would be your ability to create arbitration triangles, which I've explained earlier, means you have the buyer and the seller, and then an arbiter, which would generally be your carrier. And it's a 2/3 multi-sig, which means in order for funds and the claim to be able to go either way, it has to be decided by 2 of the 3 in that triangle, so that the carrier doesn't ever have custody over any of the asset or the actual funds. They're just somebody that helps in an arbitration if there's a disagreement. But being 2/3, that means the buyer and seller can agree upon receipt of package that it goes through. And then that kind of adds another dimension of a decentralized type exchange. where you're, let's say, purchasing a package online that's represents a high value item with certificate of authenticity. That certificate of authenticity represents your ownership in that specific item. So if you don't have ownership of that register on your sig chain, then it can be assumed that you have stolen that item and not purchased it. Or titles for a car or deeds for a house. You move through an arbitration if there's some sort of physical custody that has to change hands. Or you can just do a simple decentralized exchange, which means, hey, I'll sell this asset for this much, and then it transfers directly across. So, digital assets will probably be exchanged a little bit more. And that's where we get into something that Paul and I have been discussing over the last couple days about type of vanity addresses in a naming system. So as you know, we have names for registers. So right now they're in a global scope based on API, but we figured that there is going to become an increasing problem in the future if there wasn't a cost associated with creating those names, because somebody's just going to hoard all the names and try to sell them back to people. So what we're developing is kind of a somewhat market associated with that, where you'll be able to register indexes such as a token ticker symbol, and it'll be almost like a domain name where you can actually purchase it for an amount of Nexus and then resell it if you want as a type of asset. So that way we can start to build value in these digital assets and these names. And then your accounts themselves will be named local to your SIG chain as far as the name spacing. So that will be like checking or savings or whatever will be your local accounts to your SIG chain. It'll just be hashed to your Genesis ID so that people won't generally go and steal them. And we'll just put a simple rule in there too. If you name it in a local namespace, then it has to be made from your Genesis, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of where that's all going. So all of our major subsystems are complete and they've passed static testing, and it's a matter of weaving some of them together right now and testing that additional functionality. I think we're pushing about 500 unit tests right now for a lot of the main ledger, and I've tested double spend attempts and the whole thing sanitized, all of the validation rules, just to make sure that there's nothing that we have missed specific to that. Then the API, as it stands right now, it's been more of kind of a development API just to give an initial access point to some of the functionality. But Paul and I have worked with Dino over the past few days to establish a standard associated with it, making it a verb-based API. And since object registers are customizable objects, that means you can basically create the metadata for an object with certain fields of it mutable and certain fields immutable, such as a serial number would be an immutable field. A description might be a mutable field if you want to update a description of saying, oh, hey, it's a little bit worn or things like that. So that we can actually, what we're developing with the Assets API with this new standard is a format specifier, which can either be JSON or it can be a custom type of C syntax that we have for defining the types, or it can be implied types if no format is specified, which would be a little bit less customizable, or even things such as XML. We're not entirely sure. Every format that we're going to support at launch, we haven't completely confirmed. We're pretty much set, and Paul, you can correct me if I'm speaking out of line, but JSON, I think, is the initial format that we're supporting, but with XML parsers available in the future, so that you can essentially think of an object register as like a little object that you can build on the network, where you can define certain pieces of that object that can be modified and certain pieces that can't be modified. So we get the power of immutability without the downside of immutability, such as like Ethereum. If you have an immutable bug, you can't update the code. You have to suicide the contract and create a new one. This way, it's objects or things that can be passed between people, and they specify different types of metadata associated, let's say, with a title or a deed. And since every region has different types of metadata that they include on their specific title. I'm not sure of the differences between Australia and US, but I'm sure if we looked at two titles side by side, there's a little bit of extra information that an Australian title might have compared to a US one. So this way people can actually, as developers, model these objects themselves and pass around these different models in schema, like XML or whatever, and then define what fields can be changed and what ones can't. They can be completely immutable if you'd like, but we figured to allow somewhat of immutability on certain fields, such as balance in an object register is a mutable field, since the balance obviously has to be updated over time in that register. So that's been really fun to see that kind of come to life, and it gives a lot of additional functionality, and I think useful functionality for people. From a user perspective, you're going to just be able to click a button that says, put my title on this blockchain, and then it will be able to define based on what region you are at, specific standardized metadatas. So the other cool thing is that validation scripts themselves can actually read and write from objects, or not write, sorry. They can read from objects, so you can actually create conditions based around the value of other specific objects, which you could have an account, let's say that, is a savings account that, if your balance of your checking account is less than 1,000 Nexus, then you can withdraw some from your savings account. So it locks those funds in the savings account based on a condition of your checking account or something like that. So that's where we get a lot of really cool transactional features. And as I stated earlier, that's how the DEX is mainly going to function, using validation scripts that essentially are appended at the end of a transaction that specify its, how should I say it, its behavior if anything is trying to claim it. So in a sense, right now, you can debit or credit back to yourself, or the other party can credit. So transactions are by native reversible now, and then you just add a validation script in there to say, I can only send back to myself within 5 minutes, so that you still have somewhat mutable reversible transactions. But after a specific expired time period, the receiver of that can know that, okay, now I'm the only one that can claim it. So that's where we get that really cool reversible transaction feature. So that's all kind of plugged in and working, minus the validation script logic. And then what else? Jack has been working on some of the Prime stuff. Me and him, I think yesterday, started playing around with Sieve to improve the Prime proof of work verification, and also checking specific words. That's been kind of some deep in the mathematics stuff, so I'll spare you too many of the details on that. Outstanding tasks that we have right now are mainly just finishing the proof of stake integration, multiple contract scripts. We need to implement the new lower level protocol message set, the way that that's going to function. And I believe we have to do multiple transactions per sig chain, and then the fee model. Now the fees themselves, just so you guys have a clear understanding, with Ethereum or whatever, it's per transaction. You have gas based on the complexity of your computation. In our case, since we have primitive operations and then validation operations, we can actually choose what ones have a fee or not. So a debit or a credit is actually a fairly cheap operation to happen. So debits and credits will be free by nature. So people that want to transact with one another, it's not going to really cost them too much. We can rate limit to, how many transactions you can have per block and things like that, to prevent people from trying to spam the network. But dust spam attacks won't work in the same way with us, since one transaction with multiple contracts could have 100 outputs or whatever, and you're not going to have all the cryptographic verification to do for every one of those outputs. In Bitcoin or any UTXO based cryptocurrency, you have to do a signature verification per input, which becomes very costly. And that's one of the reasons the devs have stated, you can't indefinitely increase block sizes. It's not just a hardware limit of the physical hardware space that you have to store that data. It's also the computational limits. But since we're playing around with Falcon, that should lift that. But anyway, long story short, we don't have to worry about all of those specific nuances associated with UTXO architecture, since ours really is one transaction per group of contracts. So that way you can have, with multiple contract scripts, you can basically define a whole set of things to happen in one transaction that just clears at once, such as you saw all of the transactions I had to create on my last demonstration, doing a split dividend payment. That's going to be something that can be done with just a simple API call, which isn't going to require so many transactions, and it should be a quick setup just by basically dispatching it with multiple scripts. Let's see. And then that's pretty much it as far as the tasks and everything we're looking at, unless you have anything to add, Paul, about where we're at.
No, I just wanted to expand a bit more on what you were talking about with the fees there, and the fact that we have different fees for different types of transaction, or even different parameters. So, for example, the size of the registers, size of transactions, volume. Maybe we want to charge a different fee for hybrid blocks. So if we've got in a hybrid environment where there's a separate blockchain that wants to verify against the main chain and send in a hybrid block, that's our hybrid mode, then we can set a different fee structure for those blocks. So it's not just a single kind of fee. There's lots of different kinds of fees that can occur. And this links back to what Colin was saying earlier about the system registers. We can set some default values for these fees in those system registers, but we can then update them without requiring a fork. And why that's important is if we want to say set a particular fee in a certain amount of Nexus to send in a hybrid block right now, which will be what enterprise customers will have to pay in order to validate their chains. To hash their chain and send a hybrid block into the main chain. We might say that's going to cost 10 Nexus now, but if the fiat price of Nexus changes dramatically, then that fee in Nexus may need to also change. Through this use of system registers, we can change those fees without having to fork the network. And the step on from that, when we have the DAO, we can actually have the network vote on these changes and decide what's happening, rather than it just be determined by the developers. And that's really important, really, and something that I haven't really seen in other blockchains.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Yep. Yeah, you keep going. Sorry.
I was just going to say that where the discussions of how those the token economics, how the Nexus, the economics of our fees and how that's all going to work, that's being discussed right now. We haven't made the decisions yet on what the fee structures are going to look like. We're just putting the infrastructure in place so that we can set those fees later, and that'll be within the next few weeks.
Yep, and the fees themselves too. We're still deciding. We welcome community. Is Colin a robot only for me? Sorry, just looking at the comments. Anyway, we haven't completely decided. Right now, as the fee model exists, they actually are burnt, and that might be a good way. I mean, there's an incentive problem with miners, so miners don't always have incentive to include transactions, but we can enforce that with the tritium protocol, where if there's existing memory pool transactions, you need to make an empty block, then your block's not going to be verified. But we want to make sure that this model works, because as more use cases come in, then they're going to drive up the demand of Nexus for paying for some of these fees, or even naming services where you purchase a ticker symbol and let's say it costs 100 Nexus, or to create a token costs 500 Nexus or something. That kind of shows an initial stake in the game, and those are going to be very, very important, because those are going to drive a lot of the actual use of the Nexus cryptocurrency token. And our leniency right now is that the fee would be burnt, which benefits everybody. I think that's the best way to pay back the entire network, and in a way that's going to constrict the supply as the demand grows, which creates kind of somewhat of a deflation that can combat the reward rate of miners and the staking, so that it essentially kind of you economically hit it from two angles, which should help, I guess, build more liquidity in the markets and everything. But we welcome feedback specifically on whether you guys think we should burn the fees, or that you think they should go to a community fund that's DAO based, or whether they should go to ambassadors or developers, or whether they should go to miners. It's kind of up to you guys. I think we should have that discussion with more people too. How are we going to stop trolls from faking tickers? Well, you stop trolls from faking tickers because you make it cost money. So they're going to basically have to spend money to purchase a ticker. And the cool thing about it is a ticker symbol would be kind of, let's call it a vanity name that you purchase. And so what I'm assuming would happen is something similar to how the domain name system works now, where a bunch of people buy domains. It's kind of an investment. And then when other people want that specific ticker or name, then they're going to have to purchase that asset. And they can do that through a decentralized exchange. Somebody could purchase let's say a name for, let's call it 100 Nexus, to purchase the ticker for whatever. I mean, we don't need to really explicitly define that now, but they purchase the ticker and then they want to sell that ticker back. They can sell that ticker for 1,000 Nexus, and then people can start to create businesses around purchasing these things. If they want to invest their Nexus in actually vanity names or things like that, then they can gain their Nexus back, plus some ROI for selling it to people that have desire for that name. So I mean, the best way is to economically stop trolls from faking these tickers. And that's kind of where this discussion led to deciding these things, is how do you prevent somebody from just creating, if everything's free, how do you stop somebody from just taking every single ticker symbol and then holding them hostage, right? Well, you make a cost associated with that. So it becomes kind of more like an investment for somebody to purchase one of these vanity names, which essentially just acts as a database link on the network. that's validated through consensus. So in order to own that index and be able to point that index where you want, like point it to your register address as a foreign index, you can update that index kind of like you update a DNS entry, but you have to be the owner of that specific. So I think that creates a new, I guess, evaluation of, things that are desirable to people, which is unique names in this type of system, so that, we can create kind of more economics and
I just wanted to explain
ways.
I just wanted to clarify for everyone how this would work. So I can create a token, but that token exists in my SigChain's namespace. So if I create a token called XYZ, then somebody else can't get to it. Get is the wrong word. They won't be able to reference my token by XYZ because the kind of XYZ only exists within the realms of my SigChain. I'm trying to dumb down the terminology here, right? So to make it public, you need this separate vanity address, this index, where you can purchase the name XYZ for a higher entry cost, and you can choose to have that XYZ through a global index point to the XYZ that you have in your own SigChain, so that then that becomes a publicly usable name ticker, right? I
like DNS.
Very well, did I?
Well, it's kind of like DNS, where we kind of have like our own type of internet thing going on Nexus, so that you have these machine addresses, which is your register address, which is just big long hashes, right? 256-bit hashes for a register address. Kind of like your Nexus address. Think of it kind of like that. And then what this is it's a name that actually allows you to resolve that machine address from a human readable word. And that human readable word will be something that you purchase and register. And then in that object register, you'll be able to update that index to say, okay, well, XYZ is this or XYZ is that. And it'll allow other people to access yours through that name. So it's kind of like a domain name service for a blockchain, but for our registers and the way that they're addressed.
So then if I want to send some XYZ tokens, I can use the identifier XYZ rather than having to know the register. Big long hash.
Yep.
And we're going to have to make the cost of purchasing these identifiers, these vanity identifiers, relatively high. We don't know how much that's going to be yet. That's the discussion that we need to have, but it needs to be high enough that it's going to prevent the masses from just registering them, but people will register them. Can register them, as you say, like a business, and there will be a secondary market that evolves from that, just like domain names. But again, and that cost will change over time, because right now we might say, hey, well, let's make it cost the equivalent of $1,000 and whatever that is in Nexus. Mm-hmm. But over time, if the fiat price changes, we may need to change the Nexus fee that it costs, and that's where the system registers come into play, because we have the ability to change those parameters without forking the network.
Yep, and that's important too. I mean, we see it with Bitcoin. When the Bitcoin price goes up, the fees go up, right? And usually the demand of it drives the fee market itself too. It's a fixed like Bitcoin cost per kilobyte transaction, and there's really no way to change that. It's kind of just creates its own competitive market. So this way, I think it should help to economically stabilize the fees, especially as price increases over time. This would be something that can basically stabilize itself and change itself based around what the consensus of the network decides. Cool. Well, I think that's just about everything as far as that. I guess we can stay where people probably want to know about the security audit. We're planning on having that started next week on. So just to repeat, there's three types of tritium. I guess, or 4. The first one was the trust system that's out. That's existing on the legacy network. Then we have the staging, which is like all your legacy tritium, which, you know, it loads fast, it syncs fast, it looks pretty. And both of those are done. So the staging right now is going to go through a security audit so that we can get that ready for release. And that's the only thing that's holding back that wallet. So once we get the results back of the security audit, we will be setting a release date that we will meet, because it will be complete by the time we set a release date. And that's kind of a new standard that we're upholding as a development team, is to announce a release date is when it's complete, not try to meet a release date when it's not complete. So you'll come to find that our release dates will be more expected. Also, the roadmap, I think, should be released relatively soon. We've been working on that for the Tau with Chris Volta to help give you guys a little bit more visibility and transparency into what's left to do for each level of the Tau. So I think if there's not anything else to add, Paul, let's do some Q&A, and then Kendall can kind of take it from here and do his demonstration.
There is a question.
Someone.
Go on. You go.
Okay. Sorry. Pardon my closeness. I'm kind of blind. If someone purchases Ticker, do they own it forever, or is it like domain they need to repurchase annually? No, it'll be a forever thing. We don't want to make it like an annual repurchase. Once you own it, you own it. Generally, you have to keep paying a repurchasing fee to a domain name system, because they just want reoccurring fees. But no, it's once you purchase it, you own it. And then you can transfer it. Since a register can be transferred in whole to one another, then it essentially becomes like an asset, so they can be transferred between users if somebody is willing to sell it. Any more questions or suggestions or feedback? You're welcome, eh? Feel free to speak through your mic too if anybody wants to verbalize it, or type it in the chat if you have any extra questions. I think we're good on the questions then. I guess if any more of them surface during the demonstration, we'll just answer them as they come. So I guess that was kind of our back end update. I guess, Kendall, do you want to kind of take the lead on the front end update and kind of let people know where the front end is, your guys' progress, kind of like what we do, and then show your demonstration? Great.
Can people hear me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so yeah, mostly for the past couple of weeks, we've been working on the module market. That's the big kind of thing that we're trying to get done. And we've made really good progress on that. The documentation is almost done, and all the baseline functionality is pretty much done. And you'll be able to see that in action in a few. We've also been going over the other parts of the app as bugs and feedback comes in from you guys. But the main focus has definitely been the module market, because that's going to be it's a big feature, and it's a big selling point. Well, not selling point because it's free, but it's a big point feature for the wallet to have this kind of stuff. So we've been working really hard on it, and it's just kind of we kind of have to build modules in order to make sure that everything's a-okay for other people to build it too. We kind of have to get examples, and us dev teams, we go through everything. We're like, all right, well, this worked, this didn't work. I need more, I need more documentation here. I need some more explanation here, or this doesn't really work very well. We're kind of building Legos. We're kind of building each individual Lego and the Lego sets at the same time. So it's kind of a little bit slow coming, but it's good though, because you need to be able to go through the process of starting fresh to having a finished module in order to see what went wrong, what what needs to be improved and whatnot. Because it's obviously, it's a lot easier for us to change things now before everyone starts making modules than when everyone makes all the modules and we're like, oh, we need to, this is a game breaking, thing that we need to change. Everyone go change their modules. That's going to obviously be quite a challenge. So that's what that update is for that. So I guess we can start with the demonstration. Give me a moment to figure out how to, okay. Yeah, desktop, yeah. Okay, is this coming through to people?
Yeah, that's good.
All right, perfect. All right, so you can see here in the settings, you are now going to have a little modules tab here, and this is where you're going to have a list of your modules here. So you can drag and drop into here, but for the sake of this demonstration, I'm just going to go into our directory. Binance for Nexus is my my repo name. All right, so this is the kind of information that comes up. You have your module name, your display name, what type of module it is, version, Nexus module specific version. So this is going to be like, if the app is not, or the app needs to be this certain version in order for this to work. So, like I was saying earlier, if we make an update to the app where all the modules need to change, this is kind of where you can get that. Obviously, description, author, that's me. There's a little check mark here because I'm part of the Nexus organization, so it automatically checks that on the author if they're part of the Nexus organization. Obviously, there's a lot more security features we have implemented, but this is just a nice, quick kind of like, oh, this is made by someone that also works for the Nexus. Source code here. This doesn't work because my repo is private currently, but this is where you would go to get to the source code. Modules are required to be open source, so this is where you can go and to check that. That again, just another security feature. So then we just go ahead and install this. All right, module's been installed. The app will then refresh. You'll now see that you have a module right here. You can turn this module on and off. Doing this will also refresh the GUI again. But yeah, you have here, again, clicking on it, you can get some more information about this, as well as uninstalling it and everything. So we go over to our module, and you see here, I'm just kind of building this out. It is obviously still quite a work in progress. I just kind of copied over some of the information we have already in the market module, but I, plan on having, upgrading all of this so that it's a lot more, user-friendly, more customizable. Everything that for the market data, page, that's going to be more of a grand overview type of thing. Whereas this, we want to be able to have, if you want market data, if you want to get a little bit more nitty gritty, a little bit more specific to Binance, this is where you would go. So this is just a simple page that I, had used stuff that I've already did before. But what's cool is now that we have a Binance specific page here, is we can now integrate my user API from Binance into this application. So if we go here into user data, now I'm not going to type anything in here yet because obviously I don't want you guys to take my API key, even though there's no funds in no significant amount of funds into this Binance dev account that I made. But anyways, so in here you would log in, and then so now it's gotten your user information. You can see here displays all the balances you have on this account. Obviously, there's a lot of zeros. But if you see here, it has Nexus 4.9 Nexus in here. So this is all coming from your user information on Binance. And if we go over here, it'll automatically get your deposit address, how much Nexus is available currently, and that's currently in your wallet. And this is where you could send, Nexus directly into your Binance account, all through the application without having to leave or anything like that. And you know that this is true because look here, this is our Binance account. This is how much, this is how much is in here. This is the deposit address right here, which is the same as this one right here. For settings, I don't really have much in here yet. Just a currency changer. And obviously the big thing that I want to do after I kind of figure out and build out some of this user information and user settings and all that stuff is going to be able to do buy and sell orders directly within the application. That's going to, that's where this is going to be over here in the market, where we'll have a tab over right here or something like that, where you can execute buy and sell orders directly in here. And that's all powered through Binance's, own API. So we're able to, whatever you can use, whatever, API functionality that is available through Binance, the plan is for this module here to use that. So that way, like I said, you can pretty much see and interact with your Binance account directly within the wallet. So again, there's a lot of stuff I still need to work on, but you kind of see the power and you kind of can see why it makes sense to break out, certain things into different modules. I mean, if we had, even though it'd be, maybe it looks good on paper that we have, let's say, Binance and Bittrex and all that stuff already built into the app. The reality is it's just so much easier to maintain and to build out, and having a closed space to have all that stuff into separate modules. That way, it lessens the security risk. It also lessens the overhead. If you don't use Binance, then you don't need to get this Binance module, this add-on. So it just allows for just more customizability and more just, you can tailor it to what you need. And if you don't need all this, then you don't have to download it, and you can just have a Nexus GUI that you can see your account, your balance, and you can stake, and then that's it. And that is okay. There's nothing wrong with just wanting those types of features. So this is just an example of what we can do, and a look into the future of what we are going to do with each different modules and whatnot. And like I said, this is just us here making modules so we know what the process is, that we can fine tune the process and everything like that. Once this kind of stuff goes out public, which hopefully is soon, like I said, we want to make sure the whole process from start to finish is smooth and is understandable and all that stuff before we put out to public, because like I said it before, so much easier to change if only us are the people using it. But that should be soon, and so anyone can then make a module. They can do whatever they want with it. We are still working on some of the security things, but like we said, it has to be open source. There are settings in the app which you can turn on dev mode, so you can run and develop, like I am, which is a repo that's private or whatever you want. But And then quickly, we can just go over here to this. So here's just a React example. We have a couple different examples, again, currently private, on different ways to write code and modules in here. But here's just like a the React kind of information. So you have your dependencies and dev dependencies and scripts and all that stuff. And then we have, no, not that. So this is some information, you know, this is what the app's going to use to kind of figure out what's going on. So you, like I said, this is all the stuff you saw earlier, name, you know, version, author, whatnot. And it all gets bundled up into a pretty small folder. And then you can either, like I said, you can either use a zip file or a directory, or just drag and drop into here, and it all works pretty well so far. So we're really excited to kind of show off more stuff and have this whole framework available for public use and see what people can come up with. So that'll be soon. But yeah, so that's just a overview and example of what's going on here. And so I'll just, you know, open it up to questions for a couple minutes and see what people want. Only stop sharing so you don't see my Slack. But yeah, if people want to ask some questions, you know, go ahead, and if not, that's okay. Hopefully there'll be more questions next week. And everything you want to talk about this stuff on Slack, just go to support Tritium beta channel. And I'm usually online all the time, and I feel like I'm pretty quick to answer questions, whatever. So
I've got a question.
I'd like to add a little point to just a little comment about this. One of the other reasons for this module market too is that it's going to be really easy to deploy new Tritium functionality and new features, and like Asset Explorers. The decentralized exchange will essentially be a module as far as the interface is concerned. You can plug in a lot of other really cool stuff, even make modules for other coins, and make it kind of a multi-coin wallet, things like that. So we designed it with them, you know, I guess idea in mind that it's going to be really nice and easy to extend, and we're not going to have to constantly be pushing out new updates. You're going to basically just be able to download a module or update your module directly in your wallet and not have to constantly update your wallet itself. So I just wanted to add that comment in there because that's an important reason why we've done this, and it's going to make the Tritium module rollout also a lot more developer friendly, because anybody that builds a dApp itself on Nexus will basically be able to build a module for the interface layer and plug it right into Nexus wallet, and then you'll be able to access that dApp directly into your Nexus wallet.
yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, you know, we take a lot of information from a lot of different places in the app, and you know, maintaining that is not necessarily very fun. So with this, if we're trying to do something more complicated, more prone to, like, we need to make sure that we're one-to-one with whatever client or API that we're using, pushing that over to a module where it's a lot easier to maintain and update is a lot better, because obviously it's easier to push out updates for modules than it is to push out updates for GUI, specifically because, you know, the idea is everyone, if you're using Nexus and you want to be on the top of the chain, then everyone should be on this using the same version. So the limiting the amount of times you have to update the main GUI is always better. So I don't see any questions in the chat or on Slack.
I've got a couple of questions, Kendall, if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, Kendall, I've got some questions.
Oh, sure.
if there's none in the chat. My understanding of this of the modules is it's an entirely sandboxed environment. So from a security point of view, the modules that you're installing have limited to no access to the core application itself.
Yes.
I wanted to kind of confirm that for everybody. Are there certain settings, like application settings, that are accessible? Is there any information that you can configure in the Nexus app, the wallet app, that is then available to a module that's been installed?
Yeah, so it is like you said, sandbox. So data can come down, can stream down from GUI into the module, but data cannot be upstreamed from the module into the main GUI. So any sort of, RPC calls or not RPC, but any sort of like core functionality is separate from any of the GUI functionality. So yeah, you can we have a limited set of information, mostly core information. So, chain height and difficulty and peer connections, etc. Some of that basic information is going to be standard on, your module will be able to gather that information.
Right.
But for let's say my example, which is sending a transaction, there's going to be an additional security measure between us and the GUI for that, as well as additional security measures from the core itself, just because the core is the one that runs that function. But yeah, like you said, it's sandboxed. And we do have some information coming down, but no, your module cannot affect the GUI in any way. So there's no worry that a module will all of a sudden take over the send page of the main GUI, where every time you send it, it will go into a different wallet or something like that. That's not possible. There's no worry for that. But that doesn't mean that we are not very cautious about security. I mean, that's one of the reasons why it's taken so long to get to this point, is that we have to think very clearly and very, very hard about security and that kind of stuff. And this kind of stuff is also going to be part of the security audit, so that not only us looks at it, but people that are very smart about security also look at it, so we can cross our T's and dot our I's on all that stuff.
Presumably, information can also be accessed via the Nexus API running locally. So
yes, yeah. So you can access the core through the API, and so there's be a security measure through that, but you cannot modify the main GUI.
Sure. Okay. If developers make changes to their modules on their repos, is there any notification back to the wallet GUI to say that an update is available, or are we planning to support sort of automatic updates of modules or anything like that?
I don't quite have the answer to that right now. I know that is something that we've talked about, and I'm sure that is something that I would guess is probably partially done, and we just haven't really got around to kind of testing that function yet. But yeah, that would be definitely something to consider and something to look at, is to that kind of thing. Obviously I would say that we'd probably come up with some sort of toggle for an auto update and whatnot. I mean, some people don't like auto updates, which I understand. But yeah, no, that would definitely be something to look at. I mean, when you open up the module, information, it will make a check to GitHub. So that some of that function is already there. So it's just about, you know, building some sort of notification system in there to let people know, hey, there's a new update. You should click this button to automatically update your module.
Cool. Presumably
there's a question too from Chris Murdoch saying, for the module store, can someone build a game, for example, Snake 1997 on mobile devices to be played in the wallet? I think that's for you, Kendall.
Yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah, you could do that. Now, I don't know about mobile yet because you're still working on. Right now we're only focusing on desktop environments. But if you were to ask me, can you make a game using it and put it in the module and put it in the GUI, the answer to that is yes. And I've thought about it all the time. So that is something, if you want to collab on, I'm down, because I definitely have a lot of cool ideas. But obviously right now the priority is kind of getting some more practical modules developed first.
Yeah, and you can do some cool stuff, Kendall, too, with object registers, such as like characters or digital items inside your game that are tradable,
Sure.
Or just an object register stored on Tritium. So you can actually make games that are blockchain powered directly in the wallet, which is a really cool use case for object registers themselves. And then the DEX, obviously, where you can transfer that asset or sell that or build in-game assets or things like that, or even like things like CryptoKitties. A CryptoKitty would just be an object register.
Right.
So, yeah. There's a fun like bottom back end that you can use the Tritium protocol for to make these games, I guess, different, more interactive. Yeah.
I had a question about presumably you're providing, not you, but some documentation on how to build a module. Is there also going to be some sort of skeleton application that we can provide? This is the minimum sort of structure of a module, and then you can build it out from there. What's our plan for
Sure. Yeah. We have it's either 2 or 3. It might be just 2. We have at least 2 boilerplate projects on the Nexus official GitHub. From there, you can either fork that repo, clone it, or whatever you want to do to get that boilerplate. So that's going to be a starting point, you know, a hello world, so to speak, for modules. I like to fork it or fork it on GitHub, because then that kind of allows you to set up upstreams on Git. So that allows you to get new code from the origin repo into your forked repo, which is really nice. So obviously we want to minimize the amount of like new stuff that we put into the boilerplate examples, but that, you know, that's a good way to make sure that you are up to date. If we say, hey, all modules need X, Y, and Z, it's a good way to, you know, be up to date on that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we'll have at least 2 examples in there. I want to say one of them is pure HTML, and the other one is React Redux, which is a very powerful JavaScript engine, you know, backend thing. And those also will be documented as well. So you should be pretty good with those.
Cool, thanks. It's awesome. This is my first time looking at it. It's the work you've been doing, and it looks awesome. And I can see how this could be hugely powerful to build modules that are available for everyone to use, but also I could see how private organizations might want to build a module, you know, to view their own assets or something, whatever. If they're building an application on top of a Nexus blockchain, then they can build a UI to be able to visualize from that data or interact with it in some way and just have it built straight into the Nexus wallet. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Good
yeah,
work.
and it helps it everything and multi-coin stuff too. And it in a way, like, what is it? The main wallet provider. Everybody's all about it. Starts with an E. Anyway, everybody loves it because you can shapeshift directly into it and have multi-coins. And I think at one point they were charging millions of dollars to add a coin. And this way, you have a modular, really nice looking wallet that you can have other people that build modules for, and you can load up whatever cryptocurrency in there, and people can make Bitcoin wallets for it or Litecoin wallets or whatever they really want, which is really cool too because it'll function as a multi-coin wallet. The modules really have no limits to what they can do, but they do harness kind of the power of having tritium directly there accessible for application developers. So it's kind of like the module logical and interface layer, where the logical layer is powered by React and the interface is the HTML. So,
all right, last question.
Looking really cool.
I have one more question, and it's is there any sort of where to store data for if modules want to store some of their configuration or something like that? Is that done in the data folder where you load the module from, or what are the modules have access to in terms of file system storage and stuff like that?
Yeah, so they'll have they'll have their own folder inside of the larger folder. So they'll have their own separate kind of basically save files or save states or whatever that they can have access to, but they won't necessarily have direct access to the other data folder, other data items that are accessible from the main GUI. So yeah, we'll have save states for a bunch of for information, or if you want to save like if you were in mid typing something and having all that stuff saved while you go back to a different module and then go back to the other module. That's all available for developers.
Cool, thanks.
Cool. Well, I guess we'll go back to camera. It's getting a little bit dark here. I guess that concludes this week. I want to thank Kendall. He's been doing a really good job on the interface. We're discussing things with the security firm tonight to get that audit started. So we'll let you guys know the results of that audit. I'm sure some of you will be interested in that and get the first, I guess, iteration of the wallet out with the legacy backend, and then we're looking pretty good on the backend as well. We'll give more updates, and I'm not sure if we'll do a demonstration next week, but if we find something really cool to show you guys, we will. Other than that, if there's any further questions, we'll answer them now. Otherwise, we'll conclude this weekly Zoom meeting. No questions? All right. Well, I guess we shall conclude this meeting. And Alex, I'll have this will go on the cloud, so I'll let you know the link once it finishes processing, and then we'll upload it to YouTube for anybody that wants to watch it after. I guess until next week, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.